So as we know, Mars will be retrograde in Gemini for a full cycle this fall, and Mars will enter Gemini on 20 August here, very, very soon. And so I want to take another look at Mars retrograde in Gemini, not from a mundane historical perspective, but rather from just a symbolic, more transiting symbolic astrological perspective to kind of help us get ahead of these symbols as we move into this period. All right, welcome. I'm glad to be here, continuing to talk more about Mars retrograde in Gemini. It's a major story, Mars in Gemini, over 7 months, 2022 into 2023. And I see, my last video about the mundane aspects of it, that research that I had done. A lot of comments I'd seen on Twitter and other places, people saying, oh, I'm afraid, or is there anything good that can come from this? How can I use this energy? So I really wanted to come here with a second video. I was planning to do this anyway, but just exploring what Mars in Gemini might mean, what it means to have a retrograde cycle, how to look at that, maybe how to use that, some ideas how we can actually constructively get ahead of this energy and really embrace it. I think it's always good to just think about embracing the astrology. I mean, we have to live, we're alive, right? We have to be here. And someone had a comment, I made a comment, it's always good to be alive. What I mean by that, it's a life philosophy, that just life is a gift. And so every moment of awareness, as I'm sentient, feeling, perceiving, thinking, talking, I'm just grateful for each moment. We can bring this attitude into the transit analysis, and that's what I want to do in this video. So the first thing, let's just come right back out with the dates of what's going to happen here. Mars enters Gemini 20 August, stations retrograde 30 October, will station direct 12 January, and then Mars leaves Gemini finally 25 March 2023. That final ingress into Cancer, that ending point is interesting because upon Mars's ingress into Cancer, Saturn will be in Pisces for good, no more Saturn in Aquarius, and Pluto will be in Aquarius for the first time in a long time. And so we will have a major shift during this Mars retrograde in Gemini. So this transit was a transition transit, and it makes sense because it's a mutable sign. Mutable signs are signs of transition. So to have Mars in a transition sign, that when this is over, we're in this fresh new astrological landscape, is fitting, I think, of the transit. So I want to come back and just check in with defining our terms here. What is Mars? What is Mercury? What is Gemini? And let's start getting some symbols to play with as we're going to analyze it. I want to go back to Antiochus at Athens, as he writes about, and this is the Schmidt translation, Hermes. So Hermes is the ruler of Gemini. What is Hermes? He says Hermes is always the master of arguments, the intellectual faculty. We know because Gemini is ruled by Mercury, we're dealing with argumentation, intellect. Arguments aren't always bad necessarily. It's good to say, wait a minute, what about this point? What about this fact? And really push our own thinking, let alone the thinking of others and the ideas around us. I think it'll be particularly interesting that this Mars retrograde is happening during the election in America. We're really going to have to process ideas that are going to be coming at us during an election season. It's very much about information and what information is out there. That's a major theme of this Mars retrograde. So getting ahead of your analytical powers and your questioning abilities, I think, will be a major theme. So Antiochus, what else does he say about Eris, which is Mars? He says that Eris is the overseer of every fear, war, and passion. And so I'm going to focus on the passion here. It's the things we're excited about, that we want to move into the world because of the feeling that we have. We feel something so strongly that we have to push into the world. It's the passion that drives action. Let's next go to just quickly check in with Vettius Valens. Again, my favorite paragraph maybe in the tradition, right there at the beginning of his book. This is the Riley translation. He says Mercury is the ruler of law, friendship, and trust. And then he says that Mars becomes the ruler of action and effort. And so we have laws very much an intellectual and a linguistic field. You have to write laws down, and then you have people debating the meaning of laws through arguments, interpretations. Judges interpret what the laws mean based on the advocacy of counselors or attorneys. So you can see how this idea of argumentation using language is embedded here in Mercury, even in Valens. And then with Mars, the ruler of action and effort. I love this delineation of Mars because it's not negative. It's not something to be afraid of. Mars is action and effort, passion, according to Antiochus. So we can just think about these planetary energies. We're going to have Mars and this passionate action combining with Mercury as the ruler of Gemini, of the thought. And so acting with the mind, this might be just a theme as we enter this period. How can you use your writing skills, your thinking skills, your analysis skills, and deploy action and passion through those mercurial powers? That might soften a little bit of how we're going to look at this transit, because Mars might activate whatever's in your chart in terms of moving forward with these linguistic powers to deploy activity. I like this. To me, this is a very exciting moment. The pen is mightier than the sword. Language is reality. This is the nature of reality. We form it through words and concepts. And so we can kind of play with reality using this fundamental feature of it, which is the words and the idea sets and the expressions. And so next we can just touch base with a little bit of signology, a little bit of sign stereotypes. Isabel Hickey, Astrology, a Cosmic Science, she says Gemini, the key word is I think. So confirming that we bring into Gemini and our delineations of Gemini the fundamental nature of Mercury, right? The thought forms. And then to come back to Dane Rudhyar from The Pulse of Life, the best writing on astrology I think that exists. He says, thus Gemini must classify, must force into set categories the multiplicity of things sensed, must produce words, must impose logical molds upon the elusiveness of human contact. So you can see here he's dealing with humanity, context, what we sense, and then trying to organize it through language and thought. Hence arguments, right? Because you put two people in a room and we're going to have different ideas about how to organize through language and thought the things we're sensing around us. Just the nature of being human. So there you go. I mean, this is the symbol set that we're now navigating during a period of just Mars and Gemini. Now, if we bring in retrogrades, I want to come back to Vettius Valens, and this is chapter 14, book 4, where Vettius Valens writes about the phases of the stars. I'm just going to quote this because this is my favorite way to understand what a retrograde means for a planet, and particularly planetary stations. But he says, if the stars are past the first stationary point and are found to be retrograde, they delay expectations, actions, profits, and enterprises. If they are past the second stationary point, they cancel any delay and reinstate the same activities. And I've just always loved this because it says that once you have the station, right, this is a powerful point, and then you have the blocks and delays, then you have the direct station, and then you start moving forward again and you restore the power, the blocks get removed. And so we can think about this cycle, particularly those dates in late October, early to mid-January, where Mars is actually retrograde. That's what I would want you to have on your calendar as a period to just block off and don't do big things. If you're still thinking about how to use it, it's best to not try to put your martial and mercurial things, action of language, thought, Mercury's business, trying to do those things during the actual retrograde cycle. And you can see an example that I already talked about here in my last video, that during a Mars retrograde cycle fully in Gemini, the last one we experienced was in 1943, 1944, and Churchill and FDR, they were planning the D-Day invasion that took place in June. And so I think it's a really nice example because it's something that, in my view, is the best use of a retrograde period, which is review, analyze, think about the past. What's gone on before is what a retrograde is thematically. You can plan action, rework things. Mars is excision, bring out that manuscript, edit, cut words out, bring out old ideas from the past that you want to create with or that you want to revisit. This is how you can use a retrograde most positively. Review, revisit, rework, reformulate, plan. That's the main theme of this video. Like, the positive way to use this Mars retrograde is to pause, plan, and rework. And then once January comes around and Mars starts moving direct again, then it's full steam ahead. The cool thing about that Mars direct station in January, Jupiter's back in Aries moving fast again. And so that Jupiter in Aries is ruled by a direct Mars in Gemini there in January and February. That's go time. And we can use, I think, late October, November, December for rest, plan, and reconfiguration. That's the main theme here, so you're not scared as we embark on this long Mars transit. And that's kind of how I see this video, is mapping a little bit this retrograde. Not in full detail, just a few ideas, just as we begin talking about it. It'll be coming up over and over and over again in many videos. But because Mercury rules Gemini, Mars will be there for 7 months, the transits of Mercury actually become quite important to inform how Mars in Gemini is going to be. And in particular, Mercury retrogrades, because Mercury retrogrades 3 times a year. We're going to experience 2 full Mercury retrogrades during Mars's stint in Gemini, and I think these will be extra retrograde-y. In particular, this second one, where you have Mercury stationing retrograde on 29 December while Mars is still retrograde. And so Mars will be retrograde and its ruler will be retrograde all the way in those first 2 weeks of January until Mars stations on the 12th, and then Mercury will station January 18th. But be prepared. The other retrograde happens sooner, 10 September to October, and that's Libra, the station. The direct station is in Virgo. And so these are periods where you might want to continue with this theme of planning, delay, and it really means the Mercury retrogrades. I would be taking extra care to prepare for those, because Mercury is the dispositor of Mars, and particularly that second one, Mars is also retrograde. So it's impacting the force of passion and action that we're working with as Mars is in Gemini. One of the last things I want to talk about is this transit that happens right after Mars enters Gemini. It's a new moon in Virgo. It's the next syzygy after the full moon in Aquarius. The next one is this new moon in Virgo, ruled by Mercury. Mars is now ruled by Mercury. Mars is exactly square that new moon, and Mercury is in its shadow here in early Libra. I think this is going to be a jolt. Be prepared for a kind of jolt to the system with this new moon square Mars in Gemini. The transaction of facts that we will be grappling with, that you'll be uniquely grappling with, may show themselves here in late August with this new moon. And so be prepared, be watchful, okay? All right, this is now Mars in Gemini. This is happening from the Gemini sector of your chart, around the themes I've already discussed. Okay, you might be dealing with that for a long time because Mars in Gemini is a 7-month long transit. And then the final thing I will say here is this eclipse season that's coming up. There's 2 eclipses, 25 October, a solar eclipse in Scorpio, and then 8 November on Election Day in America, a lunar eclipse in Taurus. Both of these eclipses have Mars in Gemini playing a very important role. For the solar eclipse, Mars is the dispositor of the sun and moon, and for the lunar eclipse, Mars is it's one of the final dispositors, because Mars will be in Gemini, Mercury in Scorpio. They're exchanging signs. The moon in that Taurus lunar eclipse is ruled by a Scorpio Venus, and so there's a heavy Mars influence in both eclipses. And so that is something I just want to key you into. It might also be a peak of this energy. Between those 2 eclipses is when Mars stations retrograde. So look for that eclipse season to really be a peak kind of intensification of the Mars and Gemini story, and really kicking off this retrograde. I don't think it bodes well for like the election. I think people are gonna, as they have in every election for a long time, there's gonna be debates about the results of these elections, unfortunately and sadly. I think that's a big part of the Pluto return of America. Look for that. I would try to get stuff done. And I'll be talking all about the power of some of these transits in September and early October. Maybe the sweetest astrology that's upcoming will be that late September, October, Venus and Libra transit. But get your stuff done before eclipse season. I would really think about getting active as we settle into this mutable shift and some of these cool transits that are coming up. Slide into home before eclipse season, and then we're going to be hunkering down symbolically with that long transit. Mars in early January stations. I think it's going to be a really sweet pocket to kind of burst out of that retrograde period with Jupiter back in Aries, Mars direct in Gemini. So that's the video. A little bit of planning here for your year, a little bit of some hope or optimism about Mars retrograde. Have a good one, and talk to you soon.